because it's just extra 2 ballot boxes, actually. We have governorship and then state assembly. And Nigerians have demonstrated their readiness. I feel that at the level of voter education, we've gotten it right to a reasonable extent. People came, people understood where they needed to put their ballot paper. So all we would have had were just 2 extra, boxes. And if the process is delayed, it will be understandable that we're dealing with many elections. Maybe that's a conversation for another day. But we talked earlier, learning from this process about things that we need to interrogate. And Eze talked about the need to interrogate INEC officials that derelicted in their duty. But I also feel that interrogation should extend to those who also had contracts with INEC, the transport unions, in terms of moving all these materials and delivering them. Where delays were not due to, where we didn't have delayed in the commencement of voting, voting were concluded in time, and you still had a long time lapse between moving of those materials to the collation centers, we should also ask questions of those people, because it's a contract. They're paid, for this. And when you violate contracts, there should be penalties, for it. That interrogation could possibly also lead us to politicians who are deliberately, trying to disrupt the process or delay the process, maybe doing some calculation as to, oh, maybe this will be my stronghold. If this number of votes come here, I will be able to overtake, the other candidate. But let me also say this, and because we've seen a lot of, videos being shared, even as this program was going on, I got one, from a colleague showing and alleged that some people were from printing, for a political, party, and in order to influence the votes. We need to also enlighten citizens that those exercises are exercises in futility. Because if you grab, ballot papers and you just thumbprint them en masse, they wouldn't have been captured, by beavers. That is the truth of the matter. Now, what some people had also said is that if after accreditation they knew that 200, for example, were accredited, that they could then, go on, dump the thumbprinted ballot papers and then thumbprinted fresh ones. But that would also happen where there were no agents that witnessed the counting and already have the results. So beavers actually, as we have stated often and often, is a game changer, in this process. So gathering ballot papers and going to thumbprint them somewhere would not have, any effect. Where you could have challenge is where what is accredited by visa, which was what happened in Osun. You had more people, voting. That could, be a problem. But all these videos and so on being shared all over the places, I think they do not really help, the matter. Of course, as I said earlier on about the need for the educator to be educated. We in the media about the electoral process, we substantially, invested in that process before the elections. The media itself is actually under-resourced. So it should be understandable that when it comes to elections, a general election at that matter, where you want to have, national spread in terms of the presence of your reporters, those who were not political reporters may actually be brought into the process. And what we've always tried to do is to encourage media organizations to let journalists who will be on election duty, who may not be political reporters, to participate in pre-election capacity building and training, and also abreast themselves. In fact, we kept repeating that we must understand the provisions of the Electoral Act and other guidelines of INEC, because that is the only way we could enlighten and educate the citizens. So back to where we started, what we're seeing at the collation centers, I feel that it could be better, and this is why we may have some further delay in getting all these results to the center, to the National Collation Center, the INEC institution room here in Abuja, which would open shortly.
So, Mr. Arugunade, are you saying that knowing your party agents is as important as knowing the party and the party's candidates themselves?
Oh, of course. They are all important. When it comes to election day, the most important personnel are actually the party agents. So election day, well, the most important, the INEC officials who should be well trained, including the ad hoc staff, who who should also be well trained to do their work. Then the political parties themselves, through their agents who ought to have been trained to know what to do, to know what form to sign, to know that after they had done all that, these results had to be pasted, snapped, so that it could be uploaded to the IRF. That is the training they should have given them. But the citizens are also important, because we must not also miss some of the things that have led to some of the problems that occurred in this election process. And we give the example of Lagos State, where the resident commissioner said some of the ad hoc staff, because of the pockets of violence, and this for me is quite important, because when we say the number of the Rivers commissioner was saying, oh, we only had this incident in a few places, that few could have significant or substantial effect on the psychology of the people. So let's go back to what the INEC resident rep in Lagos said. He said, when maybe these issues of violence occurred, some parents called their children who were NYC members and recruited as ad hoc staff, asking them to abandon the work because they didn't want to lose the life of their loved ones because of elections. In a sense where we tell our colleagues that, look, no story is worth your life. So some of them just disappeared, not because they'd been bought by any political party, but because they were under pressure from their parents to do so. And these are staff that had been trained. And to replace them, you can't just go and grab anybody and say, come and replace them. So for me, dealing with electoral violence, it shouldn't occur. That should just be the point, particularly as previous speakers have said, and we ourselves have said, a lot of information have been put out there about where you were likely to have these violence. So these are things that are very, very important.
Let me interrupt you. My apologies, Mr. Arogudade. Mr. Arogudade, sorry, let me interrupt you. We're going to Abuja at this point. We're going to Abuja at this point, the International Conference Center, the venue of the national collation of results, particularly for the presidential elections. Our correspondent, Linda Hibe, is standing there. We can see her. Linda, good morning. What's going on?
Well, since most of the voting across the country has been concluded and collation is ongoing at state, so of course the attention is here at the National Collation Center here in the Federal Capital Territory, where the election results from across the country will be collated and the winner for the presidential election announced. So it's a working day in the FCT and workers are going about their businesses. However, there's still intense security right here at the Collation Center. And so much people are not allowed to enter into the Collation Center without proper identification here at the Collation Center. So the INEC chairman is expected to brief by 11 o'clock. He's supposed to open up the collation process by 11 o'clock today. So earlier we had a conversation with Mr. Festus Okoye, who told us that they're expecting 7 results today. But we're not sure if it's 7 results for the entire day or just this morning. But he says 7 results are expected today, one of which is Kwara, which is ready. And 2 more results will be coming in later. That's Enugu and Ebonyi. That an airline carrier will be sent to those states to pick up the collation officers and the resident electoral commissioners for Enugu and Ebonyi. Remember that the INEC chairman had said yesterday that planes will be sent to states to pick up some INEC personnel who are having challenges in getting to the collation center.
Now, Linda, you did talk about the INEC commissioner, chairman rather, being expected in a couple of minutes, actually, because I think I heard you mention 11 o'clock. 11 o'clock is imminent as we speak. So any moment from now, the INEC chairman is expected to walk into the hall where you are and begin the process for today. 7 states. Now, what's the atmosphere like there? Is there one of, is it anxiety? Is it expectation and all of that?
So the atmosphere is not exactly tense, but you get a sense that people here are getting anxious for more results for the states to come in and the conclusion of the exercise. So the hall is gradually filling up with journalists, local and international observers, INEC staff, and security personnel, all waiting for the INEC chairman to disclose the results from the states.
Thank you very much, Linda, for that. We'll be keeping, of course, with you as soon as we see the INEC chairman. We're coming back to that venue, the National Collation Center in Abuja. But for now, thank you very much, Linda Akime, our correspondent at the National Collation Center.
A lot of people are looking forward to those 7 states and, going back to that particular briefing. But let's continue with our guests. Mr. Arogundade, I know that you were trying to wrap up on, the question I asked you about the importance of the party agents as much as the candidates and the parties themselves.
Well, so just to, sum up this aspect of, the discussion, if we would not have a repeat of some of these problems in the elections of March 11, I think that the political parties have to go back to the proverbial drawing board to know that they have to do the needful. You know that when it comes to election on election day, their party agents as good as the results they get, and they're as good as what would really happen, because what we do not want to happen is post-election violence, and that can only be prevented where the political parties themselves are satisfied that the results that are coming out are the results that they themselves have been able to verify, and you do not go out there. And I also feel that we need to bring in the media here, because Eze did mention earlier on that we have situations where some spokespersons or party members are already declaring and saying their candidates have actually won. This, of course, is much more predominant in the social media. But for us, the conventional media, the broadcast stations, the newspapers, the online, newspapers, TV, and radio, we need to make the point repeatedly that it's only when we've had all these entire, collation. Well, it will have been good that we don't go through this process. I mean, we're just going to have 7 states now, but that is the stage where we are in, and it's only when we have all that we could actually come out and say, you've actually declared, and it would be criminal, really, if even from the results that you already have, that your candidates will not win or has not won, and yet you are deliberately misleading the public. That would then mean trying to set up the atmosphere for violence and the crisis, and we need to do everything to avoid that. But again, it's also about the credibility and the transparency of the process. At all these collation centers, we shouldn't have all these problems of inaccurate figures and so on. Even when you are displaying these results, be sure that you are not putting the name of another party under another candidate, because I think that mistake was made in Ekiti State, where the name of a political party was put twice, and people are saying maybe the other party had the votes that were given to those kind of candidates. These are all kind of confusion and misinformation going out there. So it has to be gotten right at the collation centers in the states. The process must give people confidence, so that doubts do not begin to emanate even from that level.
Mr. Arogundade, thank you so very much. Mr. Arogundade is Executive Director, International Press Center, and of course is a Channels TV analyst. We're staying with the pictures of what's going on at the International Conference Center in Abuja, but there's just enough time for me to thank Mr. Larry Arogundade for his participation this morning. And of course, to say that Ezenwa Wagu, Chair of the Partners for Electoral Reforms, is still staying on with us. even as we await the INEC chairman for this morning's proceedings. Mr. Wawo, I must ask you at this point, while we wait for this process to recommence in Abuja, there are other processes going on at the various state levels, even as we wait for this one at the national level. How difficult is it, perhaps, I mean, with what we have been talking about all morning, for those who have the interest and those who have been trying to do so over time, to keep track of everything that is happening without missing something, even as Mr. Arogunade did point out that, look, it's only when this formal announcement is made that you can say this has happened or that has happened for sure.
Well, I think Channels TV perhaps have been in the forefront of putting out all the angles, and I've scanned through many of the other platforms. I've not seen the intensity with which Channels TV has tried to put Nigerians, bring Nigerians up to scratch on what's going on. The results management process is important, and like I keep saying, it appears that no lessons have been learned. And what I mean by that is that the rivers that you just finished showing us, if you go back to 2019, we saw the drama of this whole inability to do simple arithmetic, and it is coming from the non-interrogation of how much the introduction of academics, for instance, who for me are simply announcers, because the real work of doing this work is the result is the work of the INEC officials, the EO, and that is why you see them together. So I'm still surprised that we did this in 2015. There were computational errors. You come again on national television, and people are being stepped down for simple issues of arithmetic. I think that we should have gone beyond this, and that is where the whole question of lessons being learned, and it fouls the environment in a sense in which, when people do this, sometimes people just think that there is some intentionality in the error. But what is good about what Channels TV is doing is that we can see, you know, caution. We can see people being cautioned and said, look, go back, do the right thing, come back, and the party agents, party coalition agents are also there and seeing all of this happen and are invested in ensuring that the right thing is done. And like I keep making this point about how we over-respect the political parties and their candidates in the level of not taking action that we are supposed to see them take. If there are reports, and Yaga Africa has its pre-election observation report from the 774 local governments, and the reports have been made available to the public through the media. You can spread, percentage spread of political parties in the country. What does that mean? You can say this political party is present throughout the campaign period in this number of states. That report is out there. So if you do not have presence in a state, you cannot say that you have citizen party, your party agents are citizens. That is why INEC will make a call and say political parties, send the party agents that you are going to be deploying for this election and their passports. And what we then see is that the political parties will not send passports, they will not send anybody, and they will go out and say that they are everywhere. And nobody takes them on to say, we have this report. This report says you are 46% present, you have 46% presence all over the country. This other party has 98% presence all over the country. The other one has 97% presence. This one has 8% presence all over the country. Why will you then make the claims? An election has come. You cannot by yourself clearly say
this is the number of places where we have party agents. And that is the point in which we have to call out the political parties. And now we can understand where that is coming from, because the relationship between the parties and the party agents is a transactional one. It has nothing to do with membership, that you are a member of this political party and that you are passionate about the ideology of your party to the point where you volunteer yourself to be a party agent. What has happened is that it is recruitment. The party recruits on the basis of how much you are going to pay. And the party that is paying higher will have more people coming to do provide election exercise effort for them. These are the things that we can put in the front burner.
But Mr. Wagu, it sounds like
has this result.
My apologies. It sounds like you're saying overtly or covertly that the Naira crunch or the cash crunch has played a role in this. But to speak to the data, the Yaga Africa data that you have reeled out, I wonder how many people are really aware of it, because that would be a concern. For instance, quoting the Yaga Africa preliminary statement that you talked about, it says APC agents were cited at 97% of polling units. Labour Party polling agents were cited at 67% of polling units. NNPP polling agents were cited at 51% of polling units, and PDP at 99% of polling units. I wonder how many of these political interests are aware of these, because as you said earlier, tempers are on edge now, and without this information put out for people to be aware of, people are just going to go on whatever tangent they want based on their perception of the locality in which they are, which is saturated by their interests.
Well, I think that, I just think that people are not interested in reports. And oftentimes what we see is that when reports are issued, people look at those reports from the lessons of their partisan, from the lenses of their partisan interests. And like we do often, Transparency International will say, oh, Nigeria is at the so-and-so ranking in the corruption index. We fight the report rather than going back to say, what are the things that we need to do to be able to come up in this ranking? So if this is out in the public space through the media, and a press conference we didn't just issue releases, we address the press and put out these statistics and say this party has this number of presence according to our observers that are spread in this long-term observers that are spread in 774 local governments. What you need to do is to take that statistics and begin to see what you can do with it. And then you reconcile it with INEC's report also, because INEC is publishing also the political party agent spread across the country. So you can take the Yaga report, take other reports, and look at what INEC is saying. And these reports were issued days before the election. So you go out there and see what you can do. So if it's not our responsibility as civil society is to put this out, use our leverage and reach, and even partnership with organizations like Yaga, channels, to put it out there for people. What they do with it is their responsibility, it's not ours.
Okay, well, Mr. Wagu, still on that data, and I think, the data angle is really, really very important here, because as you said, one of the questions we had asked one of the political parties earlier before the election itself was like, look, how would you persuade those who want to get out of the country to not go when they can see all the things that are happening? And one of the, information put out is just what you're confirming. People do not want, they're not interested in these reports. They just want what they want, the way they want it. So speaking again to the polling, the process, that same year, and of course, as soon as we have others, we'll definitely bring them on. In 83% of polling units, that's about speaking to polling unit level results transmission. In 83% of polling units, the presiding officer used the BVAS to scan and take a snapshot of the results sheet. That's from EC8A. 83% of polling units, that's where that happened. But in 69% of polling units, the presiding officer attempted to transmit or send the polling unit result image to the INEC online database, that's IREV. So long as it is on BVAS, one can expect that it will get eventually to the IREV portal. How significant is that for you? There are those who would say, I mean, scoring 50% is pass mark, scoring almost 70%, and that is a good thing.
Yeah, the thing with election is that it's a passion enterprise. And once passion is involved, people don't like statistics. They don't like data. So the data is saying 83% of this happened, 67% of uploads were attempted, and all of that. So in terms of percentaging, you will say that that has gone well. And that is why in the communication of the election process, it's important to also signpost, like I said in my opener, that we need to put out what has gone well and also talk about what hasn't gone well. Excuse me. The challenge of news is that it is what hasn't gone well that takes preeminence. And it is a natural thing for us. I used to make a joke with friends. I said, divorce, the story of a divorce is everywhere. But the stories of marriages that are going well is not reported. Some have hit 50 years and going forward 60 years, nobody will hear about them. But once somebody separates, everywhere will go. So the percentaging is, because election is a passion enterprise, it impacts, that percentage impacts on the integrity of the whole process, whether we like it or not. So that is why we are continue to hold the leg of INEC on the fire to up their game in a way that these infractions, no matter how little they are, do not come up and mar the good work that they continue to do and that they are doing. And sometimes my restraint in even criticizing INEC is when I look at the determination in spite of the obstacles. But like I said, it's their own challenge of always assuring, when they should put out the critical challenges that they're having so that citizens can, run on that, and those who have suggestions to make as to how to resolve the problem can also do so.
Election is a passion enterprise, but it is only played based on data. At the end of the day, it is data that will declare who won and who did better or not.
Yes, sir. But if you, as you know, sir, the challenge of that is that people sit down, for instance, like I said, you have agents in this number of polling units. You know yourself that you did not deploy agents everywhere. And you can authoritatively sit down and talk about what is happening everywhere when you do not have agents everywhere. And when you speak, those who should ask you the question and say, how many agents did you deploy for this election? Those agents they are by the definition of their role, they can even interfere with the process. Observers cannot interfere with the process. If things are not going wrong in the interest of a particular party, he can, in a peaceful manner, call attention to the electoral officials to say, this is not going well, and I need you to do something about it. I, as an observer, cannot do that. No matter how passionate I am about what I'm doing, I cannot call an electoral officer and say, this is going wrong, this is what you should do. That is why you invest in party agents, you invest in their training. But as you know, Dr. Manu just told you before he left, and anybody who has moved around, in many places, you see party agents, meters away from the area of voting, involved in conversations and not putting an eye on the process that he is a watcher of, and can then be able to make interventions. Many of them do not even by simple text message, send to whatever situation room they have. As soon as they finish, it is a business for them. It is transactional. And that is why I said the commitment to a party needs to rise beyond how much you are going to be paid. It has to be because we are invested in the ideology, in the manifesto, and in the candidate that as a party has brought you to come and work for them. But that is not what we see. And so in the conversations, we are in the scale of the analysis, we are looking at what INEC is doing, we are looking at what security is doing, but we are not interrogating the political parties and how much they have invested in ensuring that the outcomes that they are looking for is matched by what they put in.
Absolutely.
To get those kind of outcomes.
Absolutely, Mr. Wangu. Thank you very, very much for that. Of course, we will, as journalists and as media, continue to interrogate this, because we did ask quite a number of these political parties in the run-up to the elections that how do you know what's happening everywhere if you say it is the citizens who are your party agents? You didn't send anybody there. And then, you know, post-election, they start claiming that their agents who they did not send to INEC, who INEC did not recognize, has no identification of, were not allowed access to the polling center, and they come screaming to the media. So to that extent, one can see the connection in what you're saying. But I think it's time to say thank you very much, Mr. Ezenwa Wangu, for your participation in the show this morning. As always, we are grateful for your expertise, for your experience, and for your perspective. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's go straight away. In his closing statement there, Mr. Wangu did talk about security. So in comes another man who knows quite a bit about security. We have since been joined in our Abuja studios by Major General Henry Ayola. Major General Henry Ayola, of course, was former commander of Operation Safe Haven, and today he is a military strategist and consultant. Major General Ayola, thank you for your time. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here. Good day, viewers.
Let's begin from where we usually begin with all our security-based guests, which is in terms of what you have seen of this electoral process so far, and in terms of what we had known about it prior to the exercise itself. Did we do well in terms of security? I mean, people have talked about the fact that there are pockets. I'm trying to avoid that word, but I haven't been able to come up with another way of describing it, but that there are pockets of violent incidents and all of that. The Yeager report talks about 5%, and by our calculation, 5% is more than 8,800 polling units that were affected by violence in the course of the polls. But then if you take that against 176,000, perhaps we may be making a mountain out of a molehill. What do you think?
Okay, thank you very much. Well, in my own estimation, I would say it's a good attempt. Good attempt, even from the mere statistics that you have just given. I know it's desirable that we should have 100%, but we know that in human endeavors, all human endeavors, I mean, there is always room for improvement. It's only God that cannot be improved upon. I mean, in fairness to all players, including the umpire and all the security agencies, we are dealing with some peculiar situations. You know, we must always factor that in our assessment of what happens in our climb. Our peculiar security environment is one. Then even our peculiar culture of impunity that has bedeviled us for so long, that we have more or less, allowed it to fester. And rather than dealing with it squarely and frontally, we've been more or less tolerating it, and it's becoming a major factor to deal with in getting anything done in Nigeria. You can see an unrelenting, unrepentant, and a wrong determination to do the wrong thing by those who are out there so to do. So you find the security agencies have to deal with unusual situations, such that even when they are putting their best, you see cannot rule out the possibility of some this hardly determined, not just culpable, but criminally minded people who are just bent at having their ways at the expense of the societal norms and even the choice of the people. And so that's what I would say as, just a primary comment on how the whole thing has gone so far.
Then let's I know Ayo wants to jump in, but before Ayo jumps in, I just want to follow up quickly on that issue by asking about I know that when we spoke to you about this, in the run up to the election, you talked about, layers and or is it concentric cycles of security, primary, secondary, and perhaps tertiary, in terms of deployment for the election, so that while we don't want to have accusations of over militarization of the process, you also don't want it to be a free for all. So there's some kind of thin line before you step over one side or the other. We saw where we had skirmishes and the security agents that were there, being unarmed, could do nothing. So it spoke about what happened to the outer layers, which were supposed to be reinforcements. What did you make of that dynamic in the process that we had?
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, that levels of security is a usual setting. And, we must take cognizance of the fact that we're dealing with democracy here. You don't want to give a wrong impression, not just locally, but even internationally. You cannot have democracy, have elections, and you're seeing soldiers all over the place. It will send a very wrong signal. So the way it's been arranged is the best way in our setting, in the situation we find ourselves, where the military services are the outer cordon, and they're supposed to be really not seen, and of course, the police is the first level that are close by to the polling units, okay, and that was the setting. And it was good that they are not armed, because, I mean, we also have to guide against intimidating the voters by what they see around them. So in trying to balance all of these odds, that's where we find ourselves, So, but I think the issue is very clear. It still boils down to this culture of impunity and this highly determined evildoers, because they can watch, it's you're like dealing with an enemy that is seeing you, but you are not seeing him. Because they are so determined, even if you have in your outer cordon, the security, the military, for example, which is supposed to be the outermost cordon, they can always watch where they are located, and circumvent all that to get to the polling units. Okay? Maybe in our next election, we start thinking of how to still have something between the police and the polling booths, and some police that will be armed, just immediate cordon after that, so that they will be able to stop such hoodlums from getting access to the polling units. We have to think about that. We keep, tweaking these strategies that have been adopted. Each time as the adversaries, those who have made themselves adversaries of the nation, each time they change their tactics, we also have to keep changing our strategies to be ahead of them, not even to match them. And I say that that's a very tedious task, no doubt. So that's what I see.
I know Ayo wants to follow up, but let me quickly just introduce our other guest who has joined Major General Ayola, Mr. Nero Ohujabo, former special advisor to the United Kingdom Prime Minister, has joined us virtually. You're welcome to the program. Thank you for your time.
Much. It's great to join you this morning.
Indeed. Ayo, please proceed with your question.
Well, maybe I could just straight away go to Mr. Ohujabo, who has just joined us. I mean, you've been observing this as well. What would be your initial comments about how far so far?
Well, I think there's a number of things that are incredibly exciting with this particular election. And I want to focus specifically on the citizens of Nigeria who have clearly stepped forward and demonstrated that this election and the country is incredibly important to them, because they've come out against the odds in extraordinary numbers to cast their vote against all the challenges that have been outlined, whether it's security challenges or other challenges. And I think I've also observed quite a number of citizens on social media playing other roles that you would otherwise expect external agencies to play. So acting as election observers, recording what they are seeing and reporting what they are seeing to the rest of the world. So most of the news I've seen have actually come from citizens reporting their experiences on the ground. So I think that's very positive for civic participation in our country.
Sticking with you for a bit, by the way, other pictures you're seeing on your screen are that of the National Collation Center right there in Abuja. As soon as activities are about to take off, we'll let you know. So sticking with you for a bit, Mr. Kuja, but there are those who have indicated that, yes, we do have a situation on our hands where voter education has played its role. But guess what? There is now the role of political education to take us beyond where we are now. How do you see that helping us maintain the peace, stability, and tranquility that we have had until now?
Yeah, so I think that will be the incredible next step. And I think, as you say, the voter education that we've clearly seen has had an impact, means that people are beginning to grow into that next stage of really holding elected officials to account. So I think that's where the lessons need to move now. Now that more people are aware of the importance of casting their vote and what that means for the country, they can also recognize that they have a number of options available to them under the Constitution to hold those people who are elected to account. So whether you voted for the individual or not, that next level of making sure that they are representing the will of the people at that local level on a continual basis. So it's not just it's not just about the day of election and casting your vote. It's a continuous process throughout the year that you're able to hold those people to account, and if necessary to recall, but also to support them to play their role effectively. So I think people are learning, people are graduating, and as you know, Nigeria's democracy is still incredibly young. And so these processes and these lessons that we're learning along the way are very, very important as we mature as a democracy.
Well, there's a word we played with a lot yesterday, Mr. Kujab, and that word is evolution. Some, of course, many people believe we have not evolved, but we are evolving. I'm glad you also spoke to electorate has played in this process so far, but it is the same society that produces electorates that produce political actors, that produce party agents. Speaking to some of the issues raised by Mr. Wagu before he left us, he talked about the fact that the role of political agents, or the agents of political parties, are largely transactional, and not all parties have representation across all 36 states of the country. However, as you have noted, a number of people have information being put out from their own perspective, from whatever part of Nigeria they are coming from, rightly or wrongly. What impact do you see that playing in the entire scheme of things?
Well, I think, like you say, the nation is evolving, our democracy is evolving, and the political parties will have to evolve along the way as well. There is a myth that was beginning to develop in Nigeria that we are a two-party state, but I think this election has proved that that's certainly not the case. And so those smaller parties have to come up with their ways of structuring themselves at the national level in order to be able to have their agents and so on across the nation. And I think they have to really develop what it means to be a political party, not just a question of the elites who control the party or the people who are standing for public office that are controlling the party, but the members themselves will need to have a much stronger stronger stake as we move forward. And I think that will enhance our democracy greatly. Because the more people play a role at the very earliest possible opportunity, in other words, that stage of even selecting who goes forward as a candidate, I think all of these things will have a great role to play in making change. And we've seen how that has had an impact in different countries across the world as well. So it's nothing new. We have to learn those lessons in Nigeria, and individual members have to genuinely feel the power and feel and understand that they can drive change. And I think we will get there, but it takes a long time to get there.
Let me come to you, Major General Ayola, and you've spoken about your experience with, or rather your observations pre-election and then during, but this is a process that is still on. We're at the collation stage. What are your expectations as to the security at this point as results are coming in at the different collation centers and also the National Collation Center?
Well, I hope everything goes ahead smoothly, but obviously there's this continuing concern in the Nigerian context about malpractice. So that's a concern that I see a lot of people are sharing on social media, that malpractice would still have taken place. Let's hope that that's not the case. But whatever the case, I will still insist that the exciting thing for me is that the Nigerian electorate are waking up to the reality that they have to take they have to take their destiny into their own hands, and they have to grip this issue in Nigeria so that we can have a government that truly represents the will of the people and functions to serve the interest of the community.
Thanks, Nera, but that question was actually for Major General Ayola. Major General.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can. Thanks so much.
Oh, okay. So it went off. Oh, so I don't know how backward or up. Okay, from the beginning. Okay,
Yes.
all right. All right, thank you. Okay, so what I was saying is this, that, yeah, surely without having an accurate details of what exactly have been put in place to secure the collation centers and the National Collation Center, in particular. But I know that what is important here is that from the lessons learned from some of the incidents that have taken place, since Saturday to now, we should be able to update our strategies for securing those centers. And I was giving an example that the issue of hoodlums getting to polling booths and disrupting election is not happening for the first time. And so if it has happened before in previous elections, what were the lessons learned? I mean, if you take, for example, particular centers where that happened, you will notice that it's the same areas where they happened in the past, especially in Lagos that I'm quite familiar with. Okay, it's the same areas where they happen in Lagos, and you can almost pinpoint why they happen in those areas. They are usually areas that are strong for certain opponents, and so these things are planned for them to happen there. So we could be ahead of such adversaries by ensuring that they are giving very invisible cordon of the leaders of such gangs, even before the election, as at the morning of the election. Okay, whoever is the known leader of such gangs should have been kept in a kind of unseen, cordon that if he moves an inch, the security agencies keeping that cordon will be able to know, in fact, be able to stop him from moving outside his allowable area. I know we're dealing in democracy, so the issue of freedom of movement or rights and all of that will come up, but we can stay within that limit, of rights and freedoms, and ensure that we keep an eye and place a surveillance on such gang leaders, and of course, a possibility of places where he could muster his operatives from, and I think these are some of the preemptive steps that we can take to ensure that we don't have a repetition of this next time. And of course, some of these hoodlums and their leaders are even known. So even during the normal time before elections, what has been done to them? I mean, have they been interrogated before? Have there been punishment to deter others from doing such things? If we don't do those, we will always then continue to encourage the possibility of people, repeating this kind of dastardly acts. So I think these are some of my suggestions. So in the current collation centers right now, I think we need to up our games immediately. We need to, since of course most of the security men that have been deployed have finished their primary level assignment, they can now use them to beef up the collation centers, to increase the security presence in those centers. I think that will help our situation. Thank
General, yeah, sticking with you for a bit, one of the issues, excuse me, that Mr. Nwagu raised before he went away, before he had to take his leave, and I'm pretty sure you caught a little bit of that comment of his, was that politics or elections are about passion. Irrespective of what the data says, passion always seems to carry the day. For you, given what is going on now and the results that are coming in, either way, I was having a pre-program informal discussion with my colleague here, Ladi, and he was speaking along the line of, look, whether we like it or not, we have to pay attention to security right now. Because, of course, as we have all been seeing, passion is playing a significant role. What should who be doing now, especially in terms of crisis communication? What should who be doing now so things don't get unnecessarily out of hand?
Okay, thank you very much. We're looking at the point where we are right now. Okay, like I said, the last minute, the security agencies are the collation center, and of course, the arrangement that has been put in place. Like I said, there's a need to review that. Okay, but before that, let me put it this way. World over, delinquencies and malfeasance are factored into human progress and human development on certain level of assumptions, and that's where the issue of where culture matters. I mean, Samuel Huntington and one of that person, Harrison, had edited a book called Culture Matters, How Values Shape Human Progress. It boils down to it because there is there is a percentage of malfeasance that should be allowed, that should be factored into enforcement of law and order in a nation, into dealing with security matters in a nation. Now, when you have a situation where that